defines as persecution. Now, as I said, 159,000 Christians are killed every year, and the number is growing. But about 100 million Christians around the globe are currently suffering persecution for their faith, and that usually takes the form of imprisonment, abuse, hostilities, and for many of them, death would probably be welcomed. So we need to be praying and hopefully fasting for our brothers and our sisters in Christ who are risking everything in order to follow the Lord. Now, I think these are worthy charities to give to, but we can also work as advocates for the persecuted church, wherever we are. And we can do that by just telling others what is happening and rallying others to pray, to give, and to spread the word. Now, if you're listening today and you're not a Christian, may I ask that you consider what these persecuted Christians know that you don't know. We know that many will die for something they believe to be the truth. We saw that on 9/11. But consider the disciples. They lived with Jesus. They knew him. They walked with him. They saw him give sight to the blind, sound to the deaf, life to the dead. They saw him cast out demons and multiply 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and with those with that meager supply, he fed a multitude of thousands. And they saw him die on a cross, and they know he died on that cross. And their dreams died on that cross with him. And they ran for their lives. They cowered behind locked doors, and nothing could have brought them out except the risen Christ. And that's what happened. 3 days later, they heard the strange report. Mary had seen the risen Christ. And suddenly these men came out of their hiding places and stood in the streets of Jerusalem and preached boldly. And those words went on to divide time, and they changed all of history. And each and every one of those men faced unimaginable persecution and martyrdom. What changed them? It was the risen Christ. They saw him, touched him. They even ate with him. And the difference between them and everyone who has ever died for their faith is that they were in a position to know. They knew if Jesus had really risen from the dead. They knew if Jesus really had power over nature, demons, life and death, and they knew if what they taught was a lie. So, if they were teaching a lie, do you really think they could have kept that a secret, much less died for it? Every one of them died. Every one of them died except for the Apostle John, but every other one of them died a horrific death as a martyr. Peter was crucified upside down. Mark was torn to pieces, and Paul, who also saw the risen Christ, was beheaded. Now Chuck Colson explains it best, and here is what he had to say at breakpoint.org on the 20th anniversary of Watergate. Friends have urged me to tell my favorite Watergate story. I call it Watergate and the Resurrection, and it probes the way a conspiracy works or doesn't work. You see, before all the facts were known to the public, in March of 1973, it was becoming clear to Nixon's closest aides that someone had tried to cover up the Watergate break-in. There were no more than a dozen of us. Could we maintain a cover-up to save the president? Consider that we were political zealots among the most powerful men in the world, and we had a great deal to lose. Military officers at our beck and call, airplanes waiting to take us anywhere we wanted to go. With all that at stake, you'd expect us to be capable of maintaining a lie to protect the president. But we couldn't do it. The first to crack was John Dean. First he told the president everything, and then just 2 weeks later he went to the prosecutors and offered to testify against the president. His reason, as he candidly admits in his memoirs, was to save his own skin. After that, everyone started scrambling to protect himself, and what we know today as the Great Watergate cover-up lasted only 3 weeks. Some of the most powerful politicians in the world, and we couldn't keep a lie for more than 3 weeks. What does this 20th century fiasco tell us about the first century? One of the most common arguments against Christianity is a conspiracy theory. It focuses on the key event of the faith, Jesus' resurrection from the dead. Why? Because if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then he wasn't God, and if he wasn't God but only a human being, then why should we give his teachings any special credence? That's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians, if Christ wasn't raised, your faith is futile. Critics of Christianity often try to explain the empty tomb by saying the disciples lied, that they stole Jesus' body themselves and conspired together to pretend he had risen. The apostles then managed to recruit more than 500 other people to lie for them as well, to say they saw Jesus after he rose from the dead. But just how plausible is that theory? To support it, you'd have to be ready to believe that for the next 50 years those people were willing to be ostracized, beaten, persecuted, and all but one of them suffer a martyr's death without ever renouncing their conviction that they had seen Jesus bodily resurrected. Does anyone really think the disciples could have maintained a lie all that time? No, someone would have cracked, just as we did so easily in Watergate. Someone would have acted as John Dean did and turned state's evidence. There would have been some kind of smoking gun evidence or a deathbed confession. Why didn't they? Because they had come face to face with the living God. They could not deny what they had seen. The fact is that people will give their lives for what they believe is true, but they will never give their lives for what they know is a lie. The Watergate cover-up proves that 12 powerful men in modern America couldn't keep a lie, and that 12 powerless men 2,000 years ago couldn't have been telling anything but the truth.